It's noon in Kiev, and you're watching Our Time. I'll tell you about the main events at this hour. My name is Katarina Vishnevska. Hello. So, Russian forces have dropped an aerial bomb on a residential building in Kostiantynivka, Donetsk region. The aggressor has been shelling the city since early morning. According to Vadim Filishkin, head of the Donetsk Regional Military Administration, the Russians have damaged a huge amount of civilian infrastructure, more than 20 apartment buildings, as well as 3 gas pipelines. Gas supply in the city has been cut off. A total of 66 sites have been damaged. It is known that 1 person has been injured. I should add that the city is now only about 8 kilometers from the front line. Despite the danger, about 7,000 civilians still remain there. And 65 Ukrainians, whom Russia forcibly took to the buffer zone at the border crossing with Georgia, have been returned to Ukraine. Among those who returned are 10 women, as well as 8 seriously ill people. They were brought to the buffer zone without documents, means of subsistence, or access to food and medical care. Ukraine's Minister of Internal Affairs, Ihor Klimenko, emphasized that by doing this, Russia is once again violating international and humanitarian law. Last night, Ukrainian kamikaze drones attacked the Drezhba oil pumping station in the city of Oneka, Bryansk region, Russia. This was reported by the commander of the Unmanned Systems Forces, Robert Brovdy. Let me remind you that on August 13th, the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine had already announced a strike on the Oneka oil pumping station, which was used to supply the occupying army. 5 days later, Ukrainian forces also reported a strike on the Nikolska oil refinery. It is located in the Tambov region of Russia. And special forces from the main intelligence directorate of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine in the Donetsk region stopped the enemy's advance and eliminated more than 90 Russian occupiers. 5 invaders were taken prisoner. During the assault, FPV drone and bomber drone operators carried out more than 400 combat sorties, delivering precise strikes and supporting ground teams. Thanks to the coordinated actions of the intelligence officers, it was possible to stabilize the logistics of the Ukrainian defense forces and prevent the enemy from breaking through toward the border of the Dnipropetrovsk region. In addition, the fighters discovered and eliminated groups of so-called flag bearers who were trying to plant tricolors for fake claims about capturing settlements. Meanwhile, in the Kherson region, Russian soldiers are burning their own equipment to avoid storming the positions of the armed forces of Ukraine. This was reported by the partisan movement, Atesh. Its agents from the 24th Motorized Rifle Regiment of the Russian Armed Forces in the Kherson direction are destroying their own vehicles to sabotage deployments to the front lines. It is reported that the situation in this regiment is critical, with an increasing number of refuseniks caused by heavy losses and harsh orders from the command. And Ukraine, together with its Western partners, is now preparing security guarantees that will take effect after the war. This was reported by the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Oleksandr Syrsky, on social media. According to him, he took part in a video conference meeting with the Commanders-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of partner countries. Among them are Finland, France, Germany, Italy, the United Kingdom, the United States of America, as well as the Supreme Allied Commander Europe of NATO.
Together with the leaders of the armed forces of partner countries, we are developing a military component to support diplomatic negotiations aimed at ensuring lasting peace for Ukraine and Europe. The prepared proposals will be presented to the relevant national security advisors of partner countries for consideration within the framework of ongoing diplomatic efforts. Oleksandr Syrsky, Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, on Telegram.
And Ankara is ready to support any initiative to organize negotiations between Kiev and Moscow. This was reported by Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan after a phone conversation with his French counterpart Emmanuel Macron.
Turkey consistently strives for a just and peaceful resolution of the Russian-Ukrainian conflict and is closely monitoring recent contacts between the parties in Alaska and Washington. Turkey is ready to make every effort in the peace negotiations between Russia and Ukraine. Recep Tayyip Erdogan, President of Turkey. From a statement by the Directorate of Communications of the Turkish Presidential Administration,
talks with Putin could take place in any European country, for example, Switzerland or Austria, or in Turkey. This was stated by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy during a meeting with journalists. Kiev expects that Moscow will show its willingness for such a summit. So far, there have been no such signals. On the contrary, the Kremlin is actually looking for reasons to disrupt the meeting. Our correspondents will provide the details.
The Kremlin has made it clear that the Russian dictator is not ready for negotiations with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy. According to the head of the Russian Foreign Ministry, Putin suggested, and I quote, "consider raising the level of the heads of delegations." Lavrov did not specify exactly to what level, but immediately warned that negotiations at the highest level require thorough preparation. How long such preparation will take is also unknown. In addition, the Kremlin has once again decided to use the fake claim about the alleged illegitimacy of the Ukrainian government. All of this is to delay, or better yet, completely derail direct negotiations to end Russia's war against Ukraine, and to shift the blame for the breakdown onto Kiev or Europe.
Putin knows that in recent weeks he has faced a crisis. He sensed danger, the alarm bell has sounded. He really does want to stop the war, but he needs to end it in a way that looks like a victory. From a publication in the Washington Post,
Ukraine is ready for any configuration of negotiations with the Russian side if it helps to end Russia's war against Ukraine, emphasized Volodymyr Zelenskyy. We have taken a step forward. Now Moscow must show that it is striving for peace, stated the president of Ukraine. The head of state believes that the optimal outcome of the summit with Putin would be Russia's agreement to a ceasefire.
We are entering a bilateral format, then a trilateral one. I believe that without agreements in the bilateral format and without some form of ceasefire, a trilateral format is almost impossible. The United States of America needs to be present at the moment the war ends, or at some point that signals the war will end. Otherwise, there will be no success. Volodymyr Zelenskyy, president of Ukraine, during a conversation with journalists.
Donald Trump stated that he is ready to join the negotiations after a bilateral meeting between Volodymyr Zelenskyy and the Russian dictator. According to the head of the White House, he wants to see what results their dialogue can bring.
I had a very successful meeting with President Zelenskyy, and now I thought it would be better if they met without me, just to see what comes of it. You know, they've had a complicated relationship, a very, very bad relationship. Donald Trump, President of the United States, from a CNN report.
The main thing that irritates Russia is the security guarantees for Ukraine that Kiev's partners intend to provide. And these are dozens of coalition member countries willing to do so, including the United States. Moscow fears that it will lose the ability to continue ignoring any agreements. The Kremlin is especially nervous about plans to deploy multinational forces in Ukraine after a peace agreement is reached or a ceasefire is established. The Russian Foreign Ministry has repeatedly voiced its categorical no on this issue. But no one is going to give Moscow a veto right. Meanwhile, Russia continues its terror against Ukraine's civilian population. On the night of August 21st, Russian forces launched 614 aerial weapons at the country, ballistic missiles, aeroballistic missiles, cruise missiles, and various types of drones. Kiev, Zaporizhia, Rivne, Lutsk, Lviv, and Mukachevo came under attack. The target of the Russian attack in Zakarpattia was a major American company. Ukraine's Deputy Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha emphasized that this is not the first time Russia has attacked an American enterprise in Ukraine. Victoria Chistiakina for Freedom TV channel.
And the United States of America has imposed new sanctions against an international network of companies and vessels belonging to Iran's so-called shadow fleet. The head of the office of the president of Ukraine, Andriy Yermak, said that the sanctions also affected Chinese terminal and oil storage operators who assist in the illegal export of Iranian oil. The vessels of the shadow fleet also helped transport Russian oil.
This is yet another example of how our partners are taking concrete and systematic action against those who finance terrorism and destabilize international security. Just like with Russia, any attempts to circumvent sanctions will be crushed. For Ukraine, this is a signal. The world will not stop putting pressure on states that violate international law. We are grateful to the United States for its clear and principled stance. Andriy Yermak, head of the Office of the President of Ukraine, on Telegram.